What would you do if you found out your family had lied to you for years? Claire never imagined that one simple text would change her life. Christmas was supposed to be a time for family, but instead, she found herself alone, only to discover the shocking truth. Her family had been excluding her for years. Stay tuned to see how Claire takes control and exposes the truth. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Claire, everyone's staying home due to the ice storm. Christmas dinner is canceled. Stay safe. I stared at my phone, feeling the weight of disappointment settle in. But I understood. After all, Nashville winters could be brutal, and an ice storm was no joke. What I didn't know then was that this simple text, so matter-of-fact, would unravel years of family deception and change everything I thought I knew about my place in the world. My name is Claire. I'm 32, an accountant, and until last Christmas, I had always thought I was just the different one, the quiet, career-focused sister who didn't quite fit in with the loud social gatherings of my family. My younger sister Belle was always the star, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. That Christmas morning, I settled in for what I expected would be a quiet, peaceful day alone. I made myself a cup of hot chocolate, turned on some holiday movies, and tried to stay positive, even as the loneliness wrapped around me. At about 3 p.m., I was scrolling through Instagram when my heart stopped. There it was, a new post from my cousin. Perfect family Christmas at Belle's. So blessed to have everyone together. Family traditions, Christmas dinner. The photo showed my entire family, mom, dad, aunts, uncles, cousins, even my grandmother gathered around Belle's perfectly set dining table. They were all smiling, wearing festive sweaters, clearly basking in the warmth of a celebration they had deliberately excluded me from. Through the windows in the background, the skies were clear, sunny. No ice storm. There never had been one. My hands trembled as I scrolled through more pictures. There was my dad, carving the turkey. My mom, arranging her famous Christmas cookies. My little nieces and nephews ripping open presents. It hit me hard the ice storm excuse had been a complete lie, a convenient fabrication to keep me away from their perfect family gathering. Sick to my stomach, I sat there, feeling the truth seep in like poison. All those times they told me events were canceled, all those intimate dinners I wasn't invited to, how many of them had actually happened without me? How long had they been orchestrating behind my back, excluding me while pretending to care? The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mom, casual as ever. "Hi, honey. Hope you had a nice, quiet Christmas. We missed you." Her words, so light and empty, made my fists clench with the kind of fury I hadn't felt in years. This was the moment everything would change. I just didn't know it yet. Growing up, I had always tried to be the good daughter. I helped my mom with chores, kept straight A's in school, and even sacrificed my dream of attending art school to study accounting because my parents said it was more practical. Meanwhile, Belle did whatever she wanted. When she dropped out of college to become a yoga instructor, my parents called her brave. When I worked overtime to help them pay off their mortgage, they barely acknowledged it. One particular incident should have opened my eyes sooner. 3 years ago, when my dad needed surgery, I took 3 weeks off work to care for him. I cooked, cleaned, drove him to appointments, and managed his medications. Belle showed up once and stayed for an hour, taking selfies with him for social media. Then she left, claiming she had a yoga retreat to attend. Yet somehow, when my parents talked about that time, they painted Belle as the supportive daughter while I was made out to be doing the bare minimum. My extended family wasn't much better. At every gathering, my aunts would praise Belle's free spirit while asking me when I was going to loosen up and learn to enjoy life. My accomplishments at work were dismissed as boring, while Belle's latest adventure teaching yoga in Bali was the talk of every family dinner. I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that family was family and they loved me in their own way. Even last month, I spent hours helping my mom prepare for Thanksgiving, only to hear her tell everyone that Belle had done all the work while I just sat around. I swallowed my hurt and kept quiet, just like always. When Belle announced she'd be hosting Christmas this year, I offered to help with the planning and cooking. She brushed me off, saying she wanted it to be perfect. I should have seen the signs then, but I was still trying so hard to believe in the fiction of our happy family. The truth is, I've spent my entire life trying to earn their approval, making excuses for their behavior, and pretending not to notice when they excluded me from spontaneous family gatherings that everyone else somehow knew about. I convinced myself that if I just tried harder, worked longer, gave more, they would finally see me as worthy of being part of their perfect family picture. "Hi, honey. Hope you had a nice, quiet Christmas. We missed you." My mother's fake cheerfulness made my stomach turn. I gripped my phone tighter, staring at the Instagram photos still open on my laptop, evidence of their perfect family gathering that I'd been deliberately excluded from. "Really?" I managed to keep my voice steady. "Because Mia's social media posts show everyone had a wonderful time at Belle's house. Everyone except me." The silence on the other end was deafening. I could almost see my mother's face, that familiar expression when she's been caught in a lie, but is already formulating excuses. "Oh, well," she stammered, "Belle organized it last minute, and you know how you can be at gatherings, always so quiet and making everyone uncomfortable. We just thought—" "Thought what?" I pressed. "That it would be better to lie to me, to make me spend Christmas alone while pretending everyone else was doing the same." "Don't be so dramatic," my mother sighed. "We were trying to avoid any awkwardness. You know how Belle wanted everything to be perfect." That's when it hit me. All the past canceled events, the times plans had mysteriously fallen through, the family photos I'd see later on social media, this wasn't a one-time thing. This was a pattern. "How many times?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How many other gatherings have you lied to me about?" Another telling silence. Then, "Claire, you're being oversensitive. This is exactly why—" "Why what?" I cut her off. "Why you exclude me. Why you pretend I don't exist unless you need something. Why Belle gets to be the perfect daughter while I'm treated like an inconvenience." "That's not fair," my mother protested as we love you both equally. "It's just Belle puts in the effort to be part of the family. You're always so busy with work." I laughed bitterly. "Busy with work? You mean busy helping pay your mortgage? Busy taking care of Dad after his surgery? That kind of busy?" "Listen," my mother's voice turned stern. "If you're going to be like this, maybe it's better if we give each other some space. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable." The line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone as 32 years of memories suddenly crystallized in sharp, painful focus. Every excuse, every dismissal, every misunderstanding, it had all been intentional. I wasn't the problem. I never had been. That was the moment everything shifted, the moment I finally saw the truth. I didn't have a family. I had people who shared my DNA, but treated me like an afterthought. After that phone call, something inside me snapped. I was done being the family doormat. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to everyone: my parents, sister, aunts, uncles, cousins, all of them. My fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, letting years of resentment spill out, raw and unfiltered. "I've seen the photos from Christmas dinner," I typed, my heart pounding. "The dinner I was told was canceled due to an imaginary ice storm. I want you all to know exactly what you've done. You didn't just exclude me from a family gathering. You coordinated an elaborate lie to make me spend Christmas alone." I attached screenshots of my mom's text messages. "Stay home, everyone's doing the same," next to the social media posts showing their celebration. Without a second thought, I hit send. The responses started almost immediately. Aunt Betty claimed they'd just forgotten to tell me about the change in plans. Uncle Robert suggested I was overreacting. My cousin Mia, whose post had exposed their lie, quickly deleted the photos and sent me a message accusing me of causing unnecessary drama. Then came Belle's response, long, condescending, and laced with judgment. She lectured me about how I never made an effort at family events and how she just wanted one perfect holiday. She even had the audacity to say excluding me was for my own good because I clearly didn't enjoy family gatherings. But it was my parents' reaction that truly opened my eyes. Instead of apologizing, they went on the attack. My mother started calling mutual family friends, spinning a story about how I was having some sort of breakdown. My father sent me a stern email about respecting family privacy and how airing our dirty laundry was unacceptable. "You've really done it now," Belle texted me. Mom's crying, everyone's upset, and it's all because you couldn't just accept that maybe you're the problem. This is exactly why we didn't want you at Christmas. I felt like I was in an alternate reality. They had deliberately excluded and lied to me, and somehow I was the villain for exposing their behavior. The more I stood my ground, the more they twisted the narrative. When I refused to apologize, they escalated. My mother began showing up at my workplace unannounced, causing scenes in the lobby. Belle posted vague updates on social media about toxic people and choosing peace over family. My father threatened to cut me out of his will if I didn't get in line. Instead of intimidating me, their actions only confirmed what I had finally realized. This wasn't a loving family protecting itself from a difficult member. This was a toxic system trying desperately to maintain control over someone who had finally stopped playing by their rules. I decided then that I needed to do more than expose their lies. I had to completely break free from their manipulation. Little did they know, I was already making a plan, one that would show them exactly what happens when you push away the one person who had always been there for them. A week after sending the confrontational email, I received an unexpected message from Ruth, an old family friend who had retired from managing my parents' finances years ago. "Claire, I've been seeing what's happening with your family on social media. There's something you need to know. Can we meet?" I agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe downtown. When I arrived, Ruth looked nervous, clutching a manila envelope. "I've been carrying the guilt of this for years," she said, sliding the envelope across the table. "Your father swore me to secrecy, but after seeing how they're treating you now, I can't stay quiet anymore." Inside the envelope were bank statements and legal documents dating back 15 years. As I read through them, my hands began to shake. According to these records, my grandfather had left a significant inheritance specifically for my education and future, nearly $300,000 money I had never known about. "Your father was the trustee," Ruth explained quietly. "He was supposed to give you access when you turned 25. Instead, he transferred everything to Belle's accounts, using it to fund her lifestyle and her failed business ventures." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All those years I'd worked overtime to pay for my accounting degree, the student loans I was still paying off, the times I'd helped them with their mortgage they had been sitting on my inheritance the whole time, spending it on Belle. "There's more," Ruth continued. "Your grandfather also left properties that were meant to be split equally between you and Belle. Your parents sold them all, using your power of attorney they had you sign when you were 18. Remember when they said it was for emergency medical decisions?" I felt sick. The document I'd trustingly signed had given them complete control over my financial interests. They had systematically robbed me of my inheritance while watching me struggle, accepting my help with their expenses, and making me feel guilty for not contributing enough to the family. Even worse, the statements showed regular transfers to Belle labeled as business investments. Money taken from my inheritance to fund her yoga studios, her retreats in Bali, all those adventures they'd praised her for while criticizing my boring accounting career. "Why tell me now?" I asked Ruth, my voice barely steady. "Because I saw your mother's social media posts painting you as unstable and ungrateful. They're trying to discredit you before you can discover the truth. They've been embezzling from you for years, Claire. What they've done isn't just morally wrong, it's illegal." Everything suddenly made horrible sense. Their escalating attempts to paint me as unreasonable, the threats to cut me out of the will when they'd already stolen my inheritance, their desperate need to maintain the narrative that Belle was the successful sister, while I was the difficult one. I carefully packed the documents back into the envelope, my mind racing. "Thank you, Ruth. I know exactly what I need to do now." This wasn't just about a ruined Christmas anymore. This was about years of calculated deception and theft, and I, an accountant with years of experience tracking financial fraud, was uniquely qualified to make them face the consequences. With Ruth's documents in hand, I spent the next week meticulously building my case. As an accountant, I knew exactly how to trace the money trail, every unauthorized transfer, every misused power of attorney, every fraudulent document. I tracked it all. I also hired Sarah Chen, a lawyer specializing in estate fraud, to review everything. "This is a clear case of financial exploitation," Sarah confirmed. "We can file criminal charges if you want to pursue that route." I considered my options carefully. A criminal case would destroy my family's reputation, but they had already destroyed our relationship. Still, I decided to give them one last chance to make things right. I emailed my parents and Belle, requesting a family meeting to resolve our differences. They jumped at the chance, probably thinking they could manipulate me back into line. We agreed to meet at my apartment the following Saturday. The morning of the meeting, I arranged 3 folders on my dining table, one for each of them. Inside each folder was a complete record of their fraud, along with a letter from my lawyer outlining their options. Either transfer all remaining funds back to me and sign a confession, or face criminal charges. They arrived looking smug, clearly expecting me to apologize. My mother started in immediately. "Claire, we're so glad you've come to your senses." I cut her off by sliding the folders across the table. "Before anyone says another word, I suggest you read these." The color drained from my father's face as he scanned the documents. Belle's hands started shaking. My mother tried to maintain control. "This is ridiculous! You're trying to blackmail your own family." "Blackmail?" I laughed coldly. "No, I'm giving you a choice. Return my inheritance with interest and admit what you did, or I'll let the police handle it. Ruth's already agreed to testify." "Ruth had no right," my father started. "You had no right," I interrupted. "You stole from me for years while watching me struggle. You used my power of attorney to sell property that was rightfully mine. You funded Belle's lifestyle with my inheritance." Belle burst into tears. "I didn't know. They told me the money was from their savings." "Don't lie," I replied calmly. "The transfers went directly to your accounts. You knew exactly what you were doing." My mother tried a different approach. "Think about what this will do to the family. What will people say?" "You should have thought about that before stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from your own daughter," I responded. "You have 48 hours to decide. Either sign the confession and arrange the transfers, or I'm going to the police." They left in a panic, my father nearly dragging my hysterical mother and sister out the door. Within hours, the family group chat exploded with messages from relatives, all lining up behind them, of course, but I remained calm. The truth and the evidence were on my side. "The ball's in their court now," I told Sarah over the phone that evening. "But something tells me they're not going to make the right choice." I was ready for whatever came next. After all, they had already given me the greatest gift: freedom from their manipulation. The 48-hour deadline passed without a word from them. As I expected, my family chose pride over honesty. They didn't sign the confession, didn't arrange any transfers. Instead, they scrambled to destroy evidence closing accounts, shredding documents, even attempting to pressure Ruth into retracting her statement. What they didn't know was that I had already submitted everything to the authorities. The morning after the deadline, I filed charges. By afternoon, the police were at their doors with search warrants. I watched it unfold from my office, my heart steady. My father was escorted out of his workplace in handcuffs. Belle's yoga studio was seized as an asset purchased with stolen funds. My mother's carefully constructed social media facade crumbled as she was arrested during one of her charity committee meetings. The family group chat exploded again, but this time the tone was different. Relatives who had dismissed my claims were suddenly silent as the evidence became public record. The local newspaper ran a headline: "The prominent families fall from grace." All the years they spent maintaining their perfect image ended in a single day. My phone buzzed with a text from Ruth. "You did the right thing. Your grandfather would be proud." She was right. This was no longer about revenge. It was about justice. As I watched my family's lies unravel, I felt no joy, only relief. The truth was finally out, and I was finally free. 1 year later, I sat in my new home in Denver, watching the snow gently fall outside my window. The court case had concluded months ago. My father and mother had both taken plea deals, agreeing to pay restitution. Belle's yoga empire was no more, and she had finally gotten a real job as a receptionist. The perfect family image they worked so hard to maintain was gone forever. Most of the relatives who had enabled their behavior for years stopped speaking to me, but surprisingly, I didn't miss them. Instead, I had built a new support system, genuine friends who valued honesty over appearances, colleagues who respected my work ethic, and even a few distant cousins who reached out to apologize for their past actions. Ruth came to visit me last week. Over coffee, she handed me an old photo album she'd found while cleaning out her office. Inside were pictures of my grandfather and me, moments I'd almost forgotten. In one photo, he was teaching me how to fish, both of us laughing at something long forgotten. "He always said you were the strong one," Ruth told me. "He knew they favored Belle, but he believed you would overcome it." I touched the photo gently, my fingers brushing against the faded edges. I remembered his kind smile. He had tried to protect my future with that inheritance, and though it had taken years, his final gift had given me something far more valuable than money. It gave me the courage to stand up for myself and the freedom to build a life on my own terms. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting free. What do you do when your entire life is built on lies and you've been played by the people who were supposed to love you the most? When the family you've always tried to please is the one that's been keeping you out in the cold? Claire spent years trying to earn her family's approval, sacrificing her dreams and bending over backward to fit into a mold that was never meant for her. She worked tirelessly, covered for their neglect, and convinced herself that the constant exclusion was just part of being the quiet sister. But when she found out the truth that they'd been lying to her about everything, including Christmas, everything changed. It wasn't just about the holidays anymore. It was about how her family had systematically excluded her, manipulated her, and used her for years. The moment Claire decided to stop accepting their lies and expose the truth, she freed herself from the chains they'd kept her in. She didn't just stand up for herself. She took back everything they'd stolen from her, her inheritance, her dignity, and her peace. Now Claire is free, living on her own terms and rebuilding her life without the toxic influences of her family. Her parents and sister? They chose pride over honesty, and it cost them everything. So, here's the question. Would you have stayed quiet, hoping things would change? Or would you have confronted the truth like Claire did, no matter the cost? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
I need your space, Mom. It's time you figured out your next steps. Elsewhere. Juno's words hit me like a freight train. Standing in the doorway of my own home, I was confronted with a reality I had never anticipated. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, demanding I leave my home for her convenience. "Juno, this is my home," I managed, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "It's just, with the baby coming, I need more space, and you have your studio, right? Can't you just find somewhere else for a bit?" Juno's tone softened, but her eyes were unyielding, a mirror of her father's stubbornness. Graham, leaning against the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee in hand, finally spoke up. "Eloise, maybe it's not such a bad idea. A change of scenery could do you good. We need to think about what's best for Juno right now." I looked between them, my family, sensing the divide that had grown over the years. It wasn't just about space. It was a culmination of years of bending backwards for them, of making sacrifices. My transition to freelance work wasn't just a career choice. It was a necessity to keep our lives afloat while Graham struggled with his career and to provide for Juno's ambitions. Best for Juno? My voice cracked, the weight of my sacrifices pressing down on me. And what about what's best for me? Does that not matter anymore? Eloise, we're just asking for a little compromise. For family? Graham added, his voice attempting warmth but edged with an expectation of compliance. A little compromise? I laughed, a hollow sound. That seems to be all I've ever done. Compromise my time, my career, my dreams, and now my home? Juno's gaze faltered, but her resolve did not. "Mom, please. It's not forever, just until I get back on my feet after the baby is born." I stared at them, the reality of my situation sinking in. My family saw me not as a pillar, but as an obstacle, an inconvenience in their lives that could be moved aside when no longer needed. "Fine," I said finally, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "I'll go, but remember, actions have consequences. I hope you're prepared for them." As I walked away, I didn't look back. I couldn't. The pain of betrayal was too sharp, too raw. My own home, a place where I had poured my heart and soul into making it a sanctuary for us, was now a battleground. Graham and Juno's conversation faded behind me as I ascended the stairs to pack a few belongings. Each step was heavy, laden with the realization that my sacrifices had been for nothing. They had taken everything from me, and now they were taking my home. But as I zipped up my suitcase, a resolve settled over me. I would leave, but this was not the end. It was a new beginning, a chance to reclaim my life, my dignity, and perhaps, in time, my family. But on my terms. I will find my way, I whispered to the empty room, and when I do, I hope they realize the true cost of their demands. With one last glance at the home I had built, I stepped out into the unknown, the door closing behind me with a finality that echoed in my heart. The silence of my new, smaller studio apartment was deafening. Gone were the familiar sounds of my old home, the laughter, the arguments, the life that I had built, brick by brick, only to be pushed out. I sat at my makeshift desk, surrounded by boxes still unpacked, the glow of my computer screen the only light in the room. The stark contrast between my past and present life couldn't be more apparent, and as I sifted through emails, trying to find solace in work, the doorbell rang, a sharp interruption to my solitude. It was Graham, his presence at my doorstep both a surprise and a harbinger of unwelcome news. "Eloise, we need to talk," he said, stepping into the dim light of my apartment without waiting for an invitation. "What's left to talk about, Graham?" I asked, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "It's about the house and finances. Juno's needs are more than we anticipated. We're going to need more help from you." I stared at him, incredulous. "More help? After everything you're asking for more?" "It's for your daughter, Eloise. You wouldn't want her to suffer, would you?" His words were manipulative, aiming to guilt-trip me into compliance. "Graham, I've given everything, my home, my peace, my life. What more do you want from me?" My voice rose, a mix of anger and disbelief coloring my tone. "Just think about it. It's for Juno," he repeated, his voice cold, the fatherly concern feigned at best. As he left, his words lingered in the air, a toxic reminder of the betrayal that had become my reality. They expected more from me, always more, never considering the cost to my own well-being. The following day, I decided to visit the house, not to relent to their demands, but to confront the situation head-on. The sight of my former home, now overtaken by Juno's expanding needs, was a stark representation of my displacement. Juno greeted me with a tepid smile, her earlier boldness replaced with a veneer of guilt. "Mom, I didn't think it would come to this, but we really need the help. Juno, I've helped enough. It's time you and your father figure things out on your own. I've been pushed out of my home, asked to give up my life for you, and now you ask for more?" My voice, though firm, was not without pain. "But Mom, where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do?" Her entitlement was evident, expecting me to solve problems of her own making. "That's something you should have thought about before. I'm your mother, not your fallback plan." Turning to leave, I felt a surge of resolve. No longer would I be the silent supporter, taken for granted and expected to give endlessly. As I walked away, I heard Juno's frustrated voice behind me. "You're just going to leave your daughter like this?" I didn't look back. "You left me long before this, Juno. It's time you learn what life demands." That night, as I lay in the quiet of my new reality, the idea began to form. If they expected me to give more, then I would, but not in the way they anticipated. It was time to reclaim what was mine, to show Graham and Juno the consequences of their actions. My contributions, my sacrifices, would no longer be invisible. They had awakened a determination within me, a drive to seek justice for the wrongs done. And as the plan took shape in my mind, a sense of empowerment enveloped me. They had underestimated me, but they would soon learn the true cost of their demands. My revenge would be my return, my reclamation of dignity, and it would start with taking back what was rightfully mine. My resolve had never been clearer as I embarked on my plan of retribution. The first step was uncovering the full extent of Graham's deceit. Over the years, he had masterfully crafted the narrative that he was the financial backbone of our family, a story I knew all too well to be false. But it was time the truth came to light, not just for me, but for Juno too. I began by meticulously gathering financial statements, bank records, and property deeds, evidence of my contributions, my sacrifices. It was during this search that I discovered something more insidious. Documents hidden away in a file I had never seen before revealed a shocking truth. Graham had been funneling money from our joint accounts into a private one I knew nothing about. The revelation was a cold, hard slap in the face, a betrayal that cut deeper than I could have imagined. Armed with this information, I confronted Graham, demanding answers. "Graham, what is this?" I slammed the documents on the kitchen table in front of him, the numbers and transactions a glaring testament to his betrayal. He looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and guilt. "Eloise, it's not what you think. I was saving that money for us, for our future." "Our future?" I scoffed, disbelief coloring my tone. "Or your future without me. You've been lying to me, to Juno, undermining my contributions, making me out to be the lesser partner in our marriage." Graham's attempts to explain were feeble, his words empty. "Eloise, I just thought—" "You thought you'd get away with it," I interrupted, my voice firm. "You thought I'd never find out. But I did, and now everything changes." The confrontation left Graham rattled, his facade of control crumbling. But for me, it was the catalyst for my next move. If Graham could betray me in such a fundamental way, then all bets were off. I took my findings to a lawyer, explaining my situation and my desire to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The lawyer, a woman of sharp wit and even sharper legal acumen, laid out a plan that was both brilliant and ruthless. "We'll begin with the house," she said, her eyes alight with strategic fire. "It's in your name alone, correct?" "Yes," I confirmed, a sense of empowerment growing within me. "Then you have more power than you realize. We can leverage this to not only secure your financial independence, but also to send a clear message to Graham and Juno." The plan was simple yet effective. I would sell the house, the one asset solely in my name, and reclaim the financial stability Graham had tried to steal from me. But more than that, it would be my declaration of independence, a demonstration that I was no longer the woman they could manipulate and betray without consequence. As I initiated the process, my interactions with Graham and Juno became strained, their demands and manipulations more desperate. Yet, with each attempt to sway me, my resolve only strengthened. "Mom, you can't do this to us," Juno pleaded one day, her voice tinged with panic. "Where will we go? What about the baby?" "You should have thought of that before," I replied, my voice devoid of the warmth it once held for her. "You both made your choices. Now I'm making mine." Graham, too, tried to appeal to my sense of family, of loyalty, but his words fell on deaf ears. The man I had married, the father of my child, was a stranger to me now, his true nature revealed in the light of his actions. As the sale of the house moved forward, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For years, I had been bound by my roles as a wife and mother, my own needs and desires secondary to those of my family. But no longer. I was taking back control, forging a new path on my own terms. And as for Graham and Juno, they would soon learn the true cost of their ingratitude and betrayal. My revenge was not just about punishment. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my independence, and my life. The day I left for the last time, the air was thick with an unspoken tension. Graham and Juno stood in the living room of the house that was no longer ours, their expressions a mix of confusion and anger. They had just learned of the sale, a transaction done quietly, without their knowledge. "You sold the house?" Graham's voice was low, disbelief etched into every word. "Our home, Eloise? How could you?" "It's in my name, Graham. My home. And I decided to sell it," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the emotional turmoil swirling inside me. Juno, her hands cradling her growing belly, looked from Graham to me, her eyes wide. "But where will we go? What about the baby?" "That's something you should have considered before demanding I leave my own home," I replied, the coldness in my voice surprising even me. "This is betrayal, Eloise, pure and simple," Graham said, his voice rising in anger. "Betrayal?" I laughed, a bitter sound. "You want to talk about betrayal? Look in the mirror, Graham. You lied, you manipulated, you took everything I gave and asked for more." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy between us. I turned to leave, my heart heavy, but my resolve unshaken. This was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another, one where I was in control. As I reached the door, Graham's voice stopped me. "You'll regret this, Eloise. You're tearing this family apart." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. Without turning back, I said, "No, Graham, This family was torn apart long ago. I'm just the first to acknowledge it. Leaving the house behind, I didn't look back. The finality of the moment was overwhelming, but beneath the sorrow and betrayal, there was a burgeoning sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I was free from the expectations and demands that had defined my life. In the weeks that followed, the reality of my actions set in. Graham and Juno were forced to find a new place to live, their comfortable existence upended by my decision. Rumors and whispers followed me in our small community, some sympathetic, others critical. But none of that mattered. I had taken a stand, reclaimed my agency, and in doing so, had started down a path of self-discovery and independence. My new apartment became a sanctuary, a place of peace and creativity. Work flourished as I threw myself into projects, my graphic design business thriving as never before. And in the quiet moments, I found a strength I didn't know I had, a resilience forged through years of sacrifice and hardship. The phone calls from Graham and Juno became less frequent, their attempts to guilt me into reversing the sale unsuccessful. Each call was a reminder of the chasm between us, a gap that had widened too much to ever fully bridge. One day, as I sat at my desk, the sun setting outside my window, I realized I no longer felt anger or bitterness toward Graham and Juno. Instead, there was a sense of pity for them, for their inability to see beyond their own needs and desires. I had moved on, building a life that was truly mine, free from the constraints of my old one. The sale of the house, once a source of contention and pain, was now a symbol of my liberation, a decisive step toward a future filled with possibility. And as I looked forward to what lay ahead, I knew that the best revenge wasn't the pain I had inflicted on Graham and Juno, but the life I was building for myself, one where I was no longer a victim of their selfishness and deceit. It was a life where I was finally, truly free. The completion of the house sale marked not just the end of an era, but the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one where I stood firmly on my own 2 feet, unburdened by the expectations and manipulations of those I had once called family. My new apartment, once a symbol of my forced exile, had become a haven of peace and creativity. The walls, adorned with my own designs, reflected a life that was entirely mine. My freelance work, now more than just a job, was a testament to my resilience, a thriving business built from the ashes of my former life. It was during this time of renewal that I received a call from Graham, his voice a mix of desperation and anger. "Eloise, you've taken everything from us. How could you do this to your own family?" "Family?" I echoed, the word bitter on my tongue. "A family supports each other, Graham. What you and Juno did was far from supportive. It was selfish." "You're going to regret this, Eloise. You can't just start over and expect us to disappear. We're your family, whether you like it or not." "I've made my peace with that, Graham. It's time you make yours," I replied, my voice calm but firm. The call ended with a click, his threats hanging in the air, but they no longer had any power over me. The weeks turned into months, and my life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The drama and turmoil that had once defined my existence seemed like distant memories. But I knew that true closure had not yet been achieved. The final act of my plan was still unfolding, a silent countdown to the moment when Graham and Juno would realize the full extent of their actions. That moment came unexpectedly. I had ventured out to a local cafe, a small luxury in my new life of independence, when I spotted them. Graham and Juno were seated at a table near the window, their conversation tense and fraught with emotion. I could overhear snippets of their dialogue, words tinged with regret and desperation. "Can't believe she did this to us," Juno was saying, her voice a mix of disbelief and sorrow. "It's her revenge, Juno. She's made her point," Graham replied, his tone resigned. The sight of them, so defeated and broken, stirred something within me. Not satisfaction or triumph, but a profound sadness for what could have been. We had once been a family, bound by love and shared dreams. Now, all that remained were the shattered pieces of our once happy life. As I left the cafe unnoticed by them, I felt a chapter of my life closing. My revenge, though justified, had come at a great cost. The family I had once cherished was no more, their place in my life now occupied by memories and lessons learned. In the solitude of my apartment, I reflected on the journey I had undertaken. From the depths of betrayal and loss, I had emerged stronger, more self-assured. My revenge, while necessary, was not the source of my strength. It was the realization that I alone was the architect of my happiness, the master of my destiny. And so, as I looked towards the future, I knew that the best was yet to come. Not because of the revenge I had exacted, but despite it. My life, once defined by others, was now my own, and with each passing day I would build it, piece by piece, into something beautiful and unbreakable. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities, but I faced it head-on, with a heart full of hope and a spirit unyielded. For I had learned that true strength comes not from vengeance, but from the courage to move forward, to forgive, and ultimately, to find peace within oneself. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I anticipated. A crisp morning breeze accompanied my steps as I approached the house I once called home, the real estate agent beside me. The for sale sign stood prominently in the front yard, a beacon of the impending change. Graham and Juno, unaware of my arrival, were about to face the reality of their situation head-on. As I rang the doorbell, my heart pounded with a mixture of anticipation and resolve. The door swung open, and there stood Graham, his expression shifting from surprise to disbelief as he saw me. "Eloise, what are you doing here?" he stammered, confusion written all over his face. "I'm here to show the house, Graham. It's time you both faced the consequences of your actions," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the emotional turmoil within. Juno appeared behind Graham, her eyes widening in shock. "You can't be serious, Mom. You're really going through with this?" "Yes, Juno, I am. You both seemed to forget that this house was the one thing I had left. You took everything else from me," I said, the words laced with a bitterness I no longer bothered to hide. The real estate agent, a neutral party in the midst of our familial storm, stepped forward. "If you'll allow us, we have potential buyers on the way. It would be best if we could proceed without any complications." Graham and Juno exchanged a look of desperation, the reality of their situation finally dawning on them. "Eloise, please, there has to be another way. We'll be left with nothing," Graham pleaded, his voice breaking. "You left me with nothing when you demanded I leave my own home," I countered, my resolve hardening. "I warned you, actions have consequences. It's time you learned that lesson." As the potential buyers arrived, Graham and Juno retreated into the house, their whispers a cacophony of regret and disbelief. The real estate agent and I led the buyers through the property, each room a reminder of the life I once lived, the memories I once cherished. After the showing, as I stood in the living room for what could be the last time, Juno approached me, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I never wanted it to come to this." Her apology, though heartfelt, came too late. "Juno, I hope one day you understand why I had to do this. Maybe then you'll forgive me as I'm trying to forgive you." Leaving the house behind, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The sale was more than just a transaction. It was a symbol of my liberation from the chains of betrayal and manipulation. Graham and Juno's future was now in their own hands, just as mine was in mine. The days that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and finalizations. The house sold quickly, the market eager to claim such a prized property. And with the final signature, I closed the chapter on a significant part of my life. As I sat at my apartment, the deed to the house now transferred, I realized the depth of what I had accomplished. I had stood up for myself, faced my betrayers, and emerged victorious. But it was a victory tinged with sadness, for in gaining my independence, I had lost my family. Yet as I looked toward the future, I knew that this was only the beginning. My journey of self-discovery and empowerment was far from over. I had found strength in my solitude, resilience in my resolve, and a sense of peace in my decisions. Graham and Juno's path would be their own to forge, just as mine was now solely in my hands. The road ahead was uncertain, but I faced it with a newfound confidence, ready for whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. The aftermath of the house sale was like a storm that had passed, leaving behind a trail of devastation and a new, uncertain path forward. Graham and Juno, now without a home, were forced to confront the reality of their situation. The comfortable life they had known, at my expense, was gone. I heard about their struggles through the grapevine, the small town's network buzzing with gossip. They had moved into a small, cramped apartment, a far cry from the spacious comfort of the home I had sold. It was in this setting that I decided to confront them one last time, to see for myself the consequences of my actions. Knocking on their door, I braced myself for the encounter. Juno answered, her appearance a stark contrast to the vibrant, confident woman she once was. Her eyes, once full of life, now held a weariness that spoke volumes. "Mom," she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and resignation. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see how you're doing," I replied, stepping into the dimly lit apartment. The space was cramped, cluttered with boxes and makeshift furniture, a far cry from the comfort of our former home. Graham appeared from the other room, his expression hardening at the sight of me. "Come to gloat, Eloise? To see the results of your revenge?" "No, Graham, I came to see if there's anything left of the family we once were," I said, my voice steady. The conversation that followed was tense, filled with accusations and recriminations. Juno and Graham blamed me for their current situation, unable to see their own roles in the downfall of our family. "You took everything from us, Mom. How could you?" Juno's voice cracked with emotion, her earlier bravado gone. "I did what I had to do, Juno. You and Graham made your choices, and I made mine," I replied, the pain of our broken relationship evident in my words. Graham, ever the antagonist, sneered, "You think you've won, Eloise, by selling the house and leaving us like this?" "This wasn't about winning, Graham. It was about respect, about recognizing my contributions and sacrifices, something you never did," I said, my resolve firm. As the conversation unfolded, it became clear that the chasm between us was too wide to bridge. The pain and betrayal had left deep scars, too deep for easy forgiveness or reconciliation. Leaving their apartment, I felt a mix of emotions. There was sadness for the family we could have been, anger at the years of manipulation and disrespect, and surprisingly a flicker of hope. Hope that maybe this ordeal would be a wake-up call for Juno and Graham, a chance for them to reflect on their actions and perhaps find a way to change. The walk back to my apartment was a reflective one. I had sought revenge, and I had achieved it. But at what cost? The satisfaction of seeing Graham and Juno confront the consequences of their actions was overshadowed by the realization that our family was forever altered. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life, my work, and my sense of self. The drama and revenge that had consumed me were now in the past, a chapter closed. I had emerged stronger, more independent, but the journey had left its mark. The lesson was a hard one, learned through pain and loss. True strength comes not from vengeance, but from the ability to move forward, to forgive oneself, and to find peace in the aftermath of turmoil. And so, as I continued to build my new life, I held on to that lesson. The future was uncertain, but I faced it with a heart open to new beginnings, and a spirit healed from the wounds of the past. The road ahead was mine to shape, and I stepped forward with determination and hope, ready for whatever lay ahead. Years had passed since the house sale, years in which the silence between us had grown into a chasm seemingly insurmountable. I had moved on, my life now filled with new challenges and achievements, my past with Graham and Juno a distant, if painful, memory. It was a crisp autumn morning when I received a letter, its handwriting unfamiliar. The return address bore Juno's name, a name that stirred a myriad of emotions within me. With a deep breath, I opened the envelope, bracing myself for what might be inside. "Dear Mom," the letter began, each word heavy with an emotion that seemed to reach out from the page. "It's taken me years to find the courage to write this. I know I've caused you unimaginable pain, and for that, I am deeply sorry. My actions were unforgivable, driven by selfishness and a failure to see beyond my own needs." I sat down, the letter trembling in my hands. Juno's words, so raw and honest, were a far cry from the daughter I remembered. "I've spent a lot of time reflecting on my life, on the choices I made, and the people I hurt. It's been a difficult journey, one filled with regret and a deep desire for redemption. I understand if you can't forgive me, but I needed you to know that I am truly sorry for everything." The letter continued, detailing Juno's life since we last spoke. She talked about the challenges of raising her child alone, of the hardships and the lessons learned along the way. It was a story of growth and change, of a young woman who had faced the consequences of her actions and emerged stronger for it. "I'm reaching out not just to apologize, but to ask for a chance to start anew, to rebuild what we once had, in whatever form that might take." I miss you, Mom. I miss our family, despite everything that's happened. Finishing the letter, I found myself at a loss. The emotions that coursed through me were a tangled web of sorrow, anger, and surprisingly, hope. Juno's words had opened old wounds, but they also offered the possibility of healing, of reconciliation. The decision to respond weighed heavily on me. Could I forgive her? Could we ever rebuild what had been so thoroughly destroyed? The answer was unclear, the path forward fraught with uncertainty. Days passed as I pondered Juno's letter, her words echoing in my mind. It was a conversation with an old friend that finally gave me clarity. Forgiveness isn't just for those who wrong us, she said. It's for us, too. A way to let go of the past and move forward. And so I wrote back to Juno. My letter was cautious but open, expressing my own pain and the long journey I had taken towards healing. I spoke of the possibility of starting anew, not as the family we once were, but as something different, something new. Let's take it one step at a time, I wrote. Building bridges takes effort from both sides, and I'm willing to try if you are. Sending the letter was like releasing a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Whether Juno and I could truly reconcile remained to be seen, but the door was open, a crack of light in the long darkness that had separated us. The days turned into weeks, and eventually Juno replied. Her response was filled with gratitude and hope, a mirror of my own cautious optimism. We agreed to meet, to talk face to face after so many years apart. Sitting across from her that day, I saw not the selfish young woman who had demanded so much from me, but a mature, thoughtful individual who had faced her demons and emerged stronger. The conversation was difficult, filled with tears and apologies, but also with laughter and shared memories. It was the beginning of a new chapter for us, one marked not by the pain of the past, but by the promise of the future. Forgiveness had opened the door to a new relationship, one built on understanding, respect, and love. As I looked at Juno, now not just my daughter, but a fellow survivor of life's trials, I knew that the path ahead would not be easy. But for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the journey we would take together, hand in hand towards a brighter future. As I watched him roll his suitcase out the door, a part of me wanted to scream the truth about knowing his dirty secret. But I smiled instead, bidding farewell to my husband Derek as he left for his business trip with her. You have everything? Laptop? Chargers? Documents? I asked, trying to mask my inner turmoil with a warm tone. Yes, dear, all set, Derek replied, his eyes avoiding mine. He hesitated for a moment, as if sensing my underlying tension, but then he leaned in and pecked my cheek. Don't worry, it's just a standard year-end review meeting. I forced a smile. Of course. Have a safe trip. I'll keep everything in order here. He nodded and walked to his car. I watched him drive away, my heart sinking with every mile he put between us. Once his car disappeared from view, I let the facade crumble. You lying, cheating bastard! I screamed, tears streaming down my face. How could he do this to me? After 7 years of marriage, 3 of which he'd been having an affair with my so-called friend Jenna. The humiliation stung, but I vowed that karma would come for them both. I'd discovered their betrayal 3 months ago, quite by accident. Derek had left his phone unattended, and a text from Jenna Baby popped up with intimate details of their next tryst. My hands had trembled as I read the messages, each word a dagger in my heart. In that moment, I knew our marriage was over, but I couldn't confront him then, not without a plan. So I'd kept up appearances, smiling through the pain as I gathered evidence of their affair. Now, with Derek gone for a week, the stage was set. The private investigator had done his job, providing me with irrefutable proof of their transgressions, and my family, my parents and brother Luke, had rallied around me, vowing to help me expose the truth and make them face the consequences. I wiped my tears and took a deep breath. Time to get to work. I grabbed a box and started packing up Derek's belongings, stripping away every trace of our life together. By the time he returned, our home would be unrecognizable, a fitting metaphor for the end of our marriage. With each item I packed away, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The past was behind me, and the future held possibilities for healing and growth. I would be free of Derek's deception, and he would reap what he had sown. The memories flooded back, each one a cruel reminder of how blissfully ignorant I'd been in the early days of our marriage. "I'm the luckiest man alive," Derek had said, holding me close on our honeymoon in Maui. "You're my soulmate, Marianne. I'll love you forever." What a fool I was to believe those hollow words. Even then, he'd probably been unfaithful, unable to resist the temptation of other women. The thought made me sick. When we returned from Hawaii, he'd been attentive and affectionate, and we started talking about having children. But looking back, I could see the cracks appearing, subtle at first, then gaping chasms of deception. "Working late again?" I'd asked one evening, months after our wedding. "Project deadlines are piling up," he'd lied with a casual shrug. I never suspected a thing. Not until that fateful day 3 months ago, when his phone had betrayed him. "Hey, handsome, can't wait to taste you again. You made me so wet last time." The explicit text from Jenna had brought my world crashing down. "You worthless scum," I'd screamed, throwing his phone across the room. Derek had rushed home to find me in hysterics, the truth finally exposed. "It's not what you think," he'd pleaded, trying to spin more lies. "Jenna and I are just friends. Save it, you lying bastard." I'd shrieked. "I know everything. The hotel rooms, the weekends away on business. It's all exposed." He fell to his knees, groveling and begging forgiveness. "I'm so sorry. Please, we can work through this." I'd laughed bitterly through my tears. "There's no coming back from this. Our marriage is over." And so the facade had crumbled. In the days that followed, I alternated between despondent grief and volcanic fury. But as the initial shock faded, a new determination took hold, a resolve to make them pay for their betrayal. That's when I'd hatched my plan and brought my family into the fold. To their credit, they'd rallied around me without question, becoming co-conspirators in my quest for justice. Now, here I was, dismantling the remnants of my old life while Derek was off gallivanting with that harlot. She'd pay too, I vowed silently. I'd make sure both their worlds were destroyed, just as they'd destroyed mine. With my newfound determination, I knew I needed concrete proof of Derek's affair. If I was going to make them face the consequences, there could be no room for doubt or denial. That's when I reached out to Mike Rawlings, a private investigator who had helped a friend gather evidence in her own divorce case. Within a day, Mike had agreed to take on my job. "I'll need access to financial records, phone logs, anything that can establish a pattern of behavior," he told me in a hushed voice when we met at a cafe downtown. I nodded, my jaw clenched. "Whatever it takes, I want them buried under the weight of their own sins." Mike raised an eyebrow at my intensity but didn't comment further. "It'll take some time to really build an airtight case, a month at least." "Fine," I said shortly. "Just get it done, no matter the cost." As Mike nodded and we parted ways, a sliver of doubt crept into my mind. What if he couldn't find anything definitive? What if Derek had been too careful and covered his tracks? A wave of nausea washed over me, the anxiety almost overwhelming. But then Luke's voice echoed in my mind. "Hang in there, sis. We've got your back." My little brother had always been fiercely protective of me. When I'd broken the news to my family, he'd been the first to pledge unwavering support. "That son of a bitch will pay for what he's done to you," he'd snarled, punching the palm of his hand. "We're with you, no matter what." So I forced the doubts aside and channeled my energy into maintaining an aura of normalcy at home. I laughed and smiled when Derek sent his obligatory daily text updates, as if everything was fine. "Hi, honey. How are you holding up?" he messaged one evening. "Miss you." "I'm doing great," I typed back, only a slight tremor in my hands betraying the lie. "Just keeping busy with the deep cleaning I've been putting off for ages. You enjoy your trip." And on it went, a hollow pantomime of our shattered life together. But behind the scenes, Mike was hard at work gathering information through surveillance and financial records. Finally, almost 6 weeks after our initial meeting, he knocked on my door holding a large manila envelope. "Got everything you need right here," he said, handing it over. "Hotel receipts, phone logs, even photos of them together at a restaurant last week. This should put any doubts to rest." I flipped through the documents and images, a cold smile spreading across my face. "Excellent work, Mike. The truth is finally exposed." With the concrete proof of their misdeeds now in hand, my plans crystallized. It was time for the grand finale, the climactic act where betrayal met its bitter reckoning. With the evidence from Mike securely in hand, I knew the stage was set for the final act of my plan. But I also realized I couldn't do it alone. I needed allies, co-conspirators who would stand by me as witnesses and support. At first, I hesitated about bringing my family in deeper. My parents were getting older, and I didn't want to burden them unduly. Luke was still young. Could he handle the emotional intensity of what lay ahead? But as I wrestled with those doubts, my mother seemed to sense my inner turmoil. "Marianne, dear, you look exhausted," she said gently, laying a hand on my arm. "Let us help you. You shouldn't bear this burden alone." I blinked back tears and took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad, I may need to call on both of you soon for something major." They exchanged a glance, and my father nodded firmly. "Just say the word, sweetheart. Whatever you need." Luke showed up at my door shortly after, his expression grave and determined. "Heard you might be cooking up something big to take that scumbag down," he said without preamble. "Count me in." And just like that, the conspiracy was born. Over the next few days, we held clandestine meetings, plotting our moves with military precision. All of them agreed. Derek and Jenna's sins required the most severe consequences. "We have to hit them where it hurts most, socially and financially," Luke growled. "Make them radioactive in this town." Mom shook her head sadly. "I can't believe it's come to this, but they've left us no choice. Exposing their lies is the only path forward." I spread the evidence from Mike across the dining table, recounting the sordid details of the photos, receipts, and phone logs. "We'll strip them of every shred of dignity and respectability," I said, a cold finality in my tone. "They'll have to leave this town in utter disgrace." As we solidified our approach, the weight of the years of deceit fueled our collective resolve. Their betrayal had breached the most sacred bonds of family and friendship. Now they would reap the karma they deserved. "He's due back on Friday?" I told them grimly. "That's when we'll strike." The plan crystallized, a two-pronged assault that would unravel everything in their lives. First, I would strip our home bare, leaving nothing but echoing despair for Derek's return. Then Luke and I would confront Jenna directly, laying out the undeniable proof of her affair while her own husband looked on. They all nodded solemnly, their expressions a mixture of grim determination and simmering anger. "It's going to be brutal," I warned. "Are you all sure about this?" Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We're family, dear, and we always protect our own." With the plan firmly in place and my family united behind me, a strange calm settled over me in the days leading up to Derek's return. It was as if I had passed through the crucible of betrayal and emerged hardened, stripped of the naive idealism that had blinded me for so long. I went about my preparations with cold that clinical efficiency. Every item of Derek's clothing, every framed photo of us together, every scrap of his existence in our home, I packed it all into boxes and hauled it down to the garage. By the time I was done, the house was an empty shell, echoing with the hollow remnants of our shattered life. "It looks like a museum exhibit on post-apocalyptic living," Luke commented dryly as he surveyed the barren rooms. I gave a bitter chuckle. "That's exactly the point. Everything has been destroyed." Mom looked around, a pained expression on her face. "This is so final. Are you sure there's no going back from this, Marianne?" I set my jaw grimly. "After everything he's done? Absolutely not. He chose this path, and now he has to face the consequences." My mother sighed heavily but didn't argue further. We all knew the depth of Derek's betrayal. There was no salvaging anything from the wreckage of our lives. The last step was preparing my final message for him, the ultimate reveal of everything I knew about his sordid affair. I gathered stacks of the evidence Mike had uncovered, photos of Derek and Jenna in intimate embraces, receipts for hotel rooms and business trips taken together, transcripts of their lurid text exchanges. I laid it all out on the kitchen counter, organizing it meticulously. Then I composed a simple letter. "Derek, if you're reading this, then you've already seen what I've done to our house, to every trace of our life together. It's over. But there's more. I know all about your affair with Jenna. Every sordid detail, every lie and betrayal. The proof is on the counter. I've also taken steps to ensure this evidence will be seen by others. Your colleagues at the bank, Jenna's family and friends, everyone. You reap what you sow. Enjoy the karma you've earned, you miserable bastard. I read the note over a few times, the white-hot anger tempered by a strange sense of closure and liberation. This would be the final nail in the coffin of our ruined marriage. I almost pitied him for the cataclysm that was to come. Almost. With the house stripped bare and the letter penned, there was only one thing left: the confrontation with Jenna that would set the final phase of destruction into motion. Luke would be my lieutenant for that, his rage at the betrayal fueling his determination to see it through. "Tomorrow is the day," I told him firmly. "Are you ready?" He nodded, eyes glinting with icy resolve, ready to bring the hammer down hard. They'll regret the day they messed with our family. I believed him completely. Soon, they would face devastation beyond anything they could imagine, and I would get to watch every agonizing moment of it unfold. With Derek gone and Jenna soon to face her reckoning, I set about putting the final touches on my preparations. The house was a blank canvas now, waiting for his return to deliver the ultimate blow. I took the stacks of evidence, photos, receipts, transcripts, and arranged them neatly on the kitchen counter, ensuring they would be the first thing he saw upon entering. Then I placed my letter on top, its words a dagger aimed at his heart. "Dear God, it really does look post-apocalyptic in here," my mother murmured as she surveyed the stripped-bare rooms. "Are you sure about this, Marianne?" "Absolutely," I replied flatly. "He's going to walk into a world of devastation, a fitting metaphor for the utter destruction he's brought upon our lives." Mom sighed heavily but didn't argue further. Deep down, she knew the depth of Derek's betrayal made this path inevitable. With the house fully prepped, I went about removing any trace of my own existence as well. Photos of me were taken down, personal items packed away. By the time I was finished, the place was devoid of any sign of human inhabitation, past or present. I turned to Luke with grim finality. "It's done. All that's left is waiting for him to return tomorrow and witness the carnage." Luke nodded tightly. "He'll get what's coming to him soon enough, and then it's Jenna's turn." The thought of confronting her brought a cold smile to my lips. She deserved every bit as much devastation as the lying bastard she'd debased herself with. As the daylight began to fade, casting long shadows across the deserted rooms, a strange calm settled over me. It was the peace that comes from knowing a path has been set in stone, with no turning back. "Are you going to be okay tonight?" Mom asked, eyeing me with concern. "Maybe you should stay with us." I shook my head. "No, I need to be here to greet Derek when he arrives. Don't worry, I can handle it." She sighed again but didn't press the issue. After hugging me tightly, she and Dad left, leaving just Luke and me. My brother looked around the abandoned house, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "I still can't believe he did this to you. The goddamn nerve of that scumbag." "I know," I said softly, "but it's almost over now. We'll make him face the consequences and then move forward." Luke gave a curt nod. "Damn right, and tomorrow we'll bring Jenna's world crashing down too. I can't wait to see the look on her face." As the shadows deepened, we finally said our goodbyes and I was left alone with the hollow silence of the house. I wandered aimlessly through the vacant rooms, my footsteps echoing in the void. Finally, I sank down on the bare floor, leaning my head against the wall. Unbidden tears traced their way down my cheeks as the full weight of everything I'd lost, everything that was about to change, washed over me. But there would be no turning back from this path, no way to undo the devastation. When Derek walked through that door tomorrow, the final act would commence, and there would be no stopping the karma that awaited him. The next morning, I woke with a sense of grim determination. Today was the day everything would come crashing down on Derek and Jenna. They were about to face the full consequences of their betrayal. I showered and dressed methodically, going through the motions as if in a trance. All around me, the house remained an empty vessel, stripped of any hint of the life that had once filled it. Luke arrived right on schedule, his expression set in hard lines. "You ready for this, sis? No turning back now." "I'm ready," I said, my voice devoid of inflection. "Let's go end this once and for all." We arrived at Jenna's modest two-story home shortly before noon. Her husband Rob's car was in the driveway, exactly as we'd hoped. I drew in a steadying breath as Luke and I approached the front door. "You take point," he muttered. "I've got your back." I nodded tightly and rang the bell. After a few moments, Jenna answered, her brow creasing in confusion at the sight of us. "Marianne? Luke, what are you doing here?" "Don't play dumb with us," I spat. "We know everything, Jenna, every filthy detail of your affair with my husband." Her eyes went wide with shock and fear. "What? I don't know what you're talking about." "Save it," Luke snarled. "We've got all the proof. Photos, texts, receipts, everything. You're going to face the consequences right here, right now." Jenna visibly paled, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Before she could gather her wits, Rob appeared behind her in the hallway. "Jenna? What's going on?" "Nothing, honey, just—" But Luke barreled past her, grabbing Rob by the arm. "Come out here, man. You need to see the truth about your lying, cheating wife." Rob's eyes widened in alarm as Luke half-dragged him out to the front step where I stood, stone-faced. "Marianne, what the hell is this about?" Rob demanded. I simply reached into my handbag and pulled out a thick envelope, handing it to him wordlessly. He hesitated, then opened it, his face draining of color as he began flipping through the photos and documents inside. "Oh, God," he whispered hoarsely. It's all here." Jenna was openly crying now, watching in horror as her husband uncovered the undeniable proof of her infidelity, laid out in stark black and white. "Rob, baby, please let me explain." She began through her sobs, but he turned on her with a look of pure revulsion. "Explain what? How you screwed around with Marianne's husband for years behind my back? Jesus Christ, Jenna, how could you?" He sank down onto the front step, his head in his hands. Jenna hovered over him, alternating between desperate pleas and groveling apologies. I stared at her coldly, neither pity nor satisfaction in my gaze. "Do you see now, Jenna, the destruction your lies have wrought?" Her anguished gaze met mine. "Marianne, I'm so sorry. Please, you have to believe me." "Shut up," I said flatly. "There's nothing you can say that matters anymore. You made your choices and now you'll live with them. Same as Derek will." She fell silent, shaking sobs racking her body as I turned away. "Let's go, Luke. We're done here." He nodded mutely and we left Rob crumpled on the step, his and Jenna's lives in ruins behind us. As we climbed into my car, a heavy silence settled between us. Finally, Luke spoke in a strained voice. "You were right. She deserved every ounce of that devastation." "They both did," I replied simply, staring at the road ahead. "This is the path they chose. Now we move forward." There was still one final piece to unfold, the cataclysm that awaited Derek upon his return. But Jenna and Rob's shattered world would serve as the grim preamble to what was to come. As Luke and I drove away from Jenna's house, the weight of what had just transpired pressed down on me. Their world was shattered, and soon Derek's would follow suit. Justice, cold and brutal, had been served. We arrived back at the vacant house and settled in to wait for Derek's return later that evening. An uneasy silence hung between us until Luke finally spoke up. "Do you think there's any part of you that will feel remorse?" he asked quietly. "Once it's done and the dust settles?" I didn't hesitate. "Absolutely not. They made their bed. I'm just the one who ripped the covers off and exposed them." Luke nodded slowly. "I know, you're right. They brought this devastation on themselves." The hours ticked by in tense anticipation. I tried to distract myself by cleaning and reorganizing the carefully arranged stacks of evidence on the counter. But eventually, headlights swept across the front windows. Derek was finally home. Luke and I both tensed, readying ourselves for the final confrontation. The front door opened and Derek stepped inside, suitcase in hand. "Honey, I'm back. The review meetings ran a little." His words trailed off as he took in the barren, deserted house. What the hell is going on here?" His eyes fell on the neatly arranged stacks of photos and documents on the kitchen counter. Slowly, his gaze lifted to meet mine. "Marianne," he began, his voice trembling, "what have you done? What does it look like?" I asked coldly. "I've stripped away every trace of our life together. It's over." He approached the counter, snatching up the envelope with shaking hands. As he flipped through the damning contents, his face morphed into a mask of horror. "Oh, God! Marianne, please, let me explain." "Save it," I cut him off. "There's nothing you can say. Your lies have been exposed. Your betrayal is out in the open for all to see." Derek crumpled forward onto the counter, his head in his hands as he began to sob. But there was no pity or remorse in me, only a sense of grim satisfaction watching the devastation wash over him. Finally, he lifted his tear-stained face, anguish and pleading written across his features. "Marianne, please, I'm begging you. We can work through this. I'll do anything. You had your chance, and you blew it in the most vile way imaginable," I spat. "Your sins came with consequences, and now you have to live with them." Frantically, he scanned the various documents and photos again, realization dawning on him. "Jenna, oh God, you exposed her too, didn't you?" he whispered, his eyes widening. "Her whole world is destroyed because of me." "Because of both of you," Luke growled from beside me. "You shattered 2 families with your disgusting lies." Derek just shook his head miserably, seemingly broken and defeated. I regarded him with a cold finality. "It's over, Derek. You're going to face the music for your actions, the social and professional ruin you brought on yourself. You and Jenna are finished in this town and everywhere else thanks to social media." He flinched at my words as if struck, but I felt no remorse, no desire to soften the blow. "Pack up what little you have left and get out," I told him flatly. "This chapter of our lives is closed." Wordlessly, he began gathering his scattered belongings as Luke and I watched in silence. Once he'd carried everything out to his car, he turned back to face me. I'm so sorry, Marianne," he whispered. "For everything." I just stared at him, giving no reaction. After a long moment, he turned and walked out the door, his head bowed in utter defeat. As his car pulled away, Luke put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Are you going to be okay?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I will be. It's over now. I'm free of him and his web of lies." We stood silently as dusk settled over the empty house. A sense of closure, of finality took hold. The path before me was clear. "Let's go," I told Luke softly. "It's time for me to start over." Without a backward glance, we walked outside and climbed into my car. As we pulled away, I felt a profound sense of liberation and peace. I had prevailed through the crucible of betrayal and emerged on the other side, ready to begin living again. The reckoning was complete. Justice had been served in the most brutal way. Now it was time to heal and rebuild a life free from Derek's dark shadow. The future was mine to shape, and I would seize it with all the resilience and determination I could muster. "This house isn't just yours anymore. It's ours," Marla declared, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. My heart sank as I watched the smug expression spread across her face, her words shattering the peace Eli and I had fought so hard to create. "What do you mean? Ours?" Eli demanded, his brow furrowed in confusion. "We built this home for our retirement, not for you and Nathan to move in." Marla's laugh was cold and condescending. "Oh, please. You didn't honestly think we'd let you two enjoy this place all to yourselves, did you?" She gestured around the spacious living room, her gaze lingering on the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the pristine backyard. "This is the perfect place for us to start our family." I exchanged a worried glance with Eli, my stomach twisting into knots. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. We had spent years planning and saving for this moment, envisioning a quiet, peaceful retirement surrounded by nature, far away from the chaos of the city. But here was Marla, barging in and declaring our sanctuary as her own. "Marla, we've discussed this," Nathan interjected, his voice strained. "Mom and Dad don't want us living here. It's their home." "And what's yours is mine, remember?" Marla shot back, her eyes narrowing. "Or did you forget that little detail?" Nathan wilted under her gaze, and my heart broke for him. I had always known Marla was bad news, but I had never imagined she would stoop to such levels of manipulation. Eli stepped forward, his jaw set in determination. "Marla, you have no right to make demands like this. This is our home, and we will not let you take it from us." "Oh, Eli," Marla said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You're getting old, and you know it. You and Renee won't be able to keep up with this place for much longer. You'll need our help." My blood boiled at her words. I had spent my entire life caring for others, and I wasn't about to let some entitled brat treat me like a helpless old woman. "We don't need your help, Marla," I said, my voice firm, "and we certainly don't need your constant disrespect and demands." Marla's eyes flashed dangerously. "We'll see about that," she hissed. "This house is ours now, and there's nothing you can do about it." As she stormed out of the room, dragging a reluctant Nathan behind her, I felt a surge of determination rise within me. Marla had crossed a line, and I was done being a doormat. It was time to take action and reclaim our lives. I stared out the window, watching the sun dip below the trees that lined our backyard. It was a peaceful sight, one that should have filled me with a sense of contentment and happiness. But instead, all I felt was a growing sense of dread. "Mom, can we talk?" Nathan's voice startled me out of my thoughts, and I turned to see him standing in the doorway, his face etched with worry. "Of course, honey," I said, gesturing for him to come in. "What's on your mind?" Nathan hesitated, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for the right words. "It's Marla," he said finally. "I don't know what to do." I suppressed a sigh, trying to keep my emotions in check. "What has she done now?" Nathan shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "It's not just one thing, Mom. It's everything. She's demanding, manipulative, and she treats you and Dad like dirt." "I know, sweetie," I said, reaching out to take his hand. "Believe me, I've seen it too." "Then why do we put up with it?" Nathan asked, his voice rising in frustration. "Why do we let her walk all over us like this?" I paused, considering my words carefully. "You know, when you first brought Marla home, I was so excited for you. I thought she was the one, the woman who would make you happy and complete our family." Nathan's face fell, and I could see the shame and regret in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have listened to you and Dad. You tried to warn me, but I was too stubborn to see the truth." "It's not your fault, Nathan," I said, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. "Marla is a master manipulator, and she's had years to sink her claws into you. But enough is enough." "What do you mean?" Nathan asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "Your father and I have been talking, and we've decided that we can't let Marla continue to disrupt our lives. It's time to take a stand." Nathan's eyes widened in surprise. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I'm not going to let her ruin our retirement. We worked too hard for this, and she's not going to take it away from us." Nathan nodded slowly, his expression a mix of fear and determination. "Whatever you decide, Mom, I'll support you. I'm done with Marla's games, too." As we embraced, I felt a sense of resolve wash over me. Marla had pushed us too far, and it was time to push back. I didn't know how it would end, but I knew one thing for certain. Our family was stronger than her, and we would find a way to reclaim our peace. "I can't believe the nerve of that woman," Eli exclaimed, pacing back and forth across the living room. "She's gone too far this time." I nodded in agreement, unable to hide my own anger. "I know, honey. Marla's demands have gotten completely out of control." "Out of control?" Eli stopped in his tracks, his eyes blazing. "That's an understatement. Do you know what she did today?" I shook my head, dreading the answer. "She came to me with a stack of bills and demanded that we pay them," Eli said, his hands clenched into fists. "She said that since we're all family now, we should be sharing expenses." "What?" I gasped, my jaw dropping in disbelief. "She can't expect us to pay her bills." "That's not even the worst part," Eli continued, his voice growing louder. "When I told her we couldn't afford to take on her debt, she threatened to kick us out of our own home." "She wouldn't dare," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "Oh, she dared. All right," Eli said, his voice dripping with contempt. "She said that since she and Nathan are paying the mortgage, they have a right to do whatever they want with the house." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Marla had always been manipulative and demanding, but this was a new low, even for her. "That's it," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I'm done playing nice with her. It's time to put an end to this madness once and for all." Eli nodded, his expression grim. "I couldn't agree more. We've been pushovers for too long, and it's only emboldened her." "What are we going to do?" I asked, my mind racing. "I have an idea," Eli said, a glint of determination in his eyes. "We're going to call a family meeting and lay all our cards on the table. We're going to expose Marla for the manipulative, conniving woman she is, and we're going to make it clear that we won't tolerate her behavior any longer." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I considered Eli's words. It was a risky move, but I knew he was right. We couldn't continue to let Marla walk all over us. It was time to take a stand. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "Let's do it. Let's call everyone together and put an end to this once and for all." As we made our plans, I could feel a sense of resolve building within me. Marla had pushed us too far, and we were finally ready to push back. It was time to reclaim our lives and our home, no matter what it took. "What do you mean you're taking the master bedroom?" I demanded, my voice rising in disbelief. Marla simply shrugged, her face a mask of indifference. "It's the biggest room in the house, and it has the best view. Nathan and I deserve to have it." I could feel my blood pressure rising, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "This is our home, Marla. We built it for our retirement, and we get to decide who stays where." "Oh, please," Marla scoffed. "You're just a couple of old people who are going to need our help to take care of this place. The least you could do is give us the best room." "How dare you?" Eli roared, stepping forward with fury in his eyes. "We've worked our entire lives to afford this house, and you have no right to come in here and make demands like this." Marla turned to face him, her expression cold and calculating. "You forget that Nathan and I are paying the mortgage now. That means we have a say in how things are run around here." I felt my heart sink as I realized the implications of her words. She was trying to take control of our home, using Nathan's financial support as leverage. "That's not how this works, Marla," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "This is our house, not yours. We decide who stays where, and we're not giving up the master bedroom to you." Marla's eyes narrowed, and I could see the fury building behind them. "Fine," she spat. "Have it your way. But don't come crying to me when you can't keep up with the maintenance on this place." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. "Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry," Nathan said, his voice trembling with shame and regret. "I never meant for things to get this far." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "It's not your fault, Nathan. Marla is the one who is pushing us to this point." "But I should have done something sooner," Nathan insisted. "I should have seen what she was doing and put a stop to it." Eli placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his expression one of understanding. "It's not too late, son. We can still put an end to this." Nathan looked up at him, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "How?" "Marla is never going to back down. She thinks she has the upper hand." I stepped forward, my mind made up. "Then we'll have to take the upper hand back," I said, my voice firm with resolve. "It's time we showed Marla that she doesn't control us or our home." Eli nodded in agreement. "Your mother's right, Nathan. We've been too passive for too long. It's time to take action and reclaim our lives." As we began to discuss our plan, I could feel a sense of determination growing within me. Marla had pushed us too far, and we were finally ready to push back. It was time to take a stand, no matter the consequences. "Are you sure about this?" Nathan asked, his voice laced with uncertainty. "Once we start down this path, there's no turning back." I exchanged a glance with Eli, my resolve unwavering. "We're sure, honey. Marla has left us no choice." Nathan nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Okay then, let's do it." As we began to lay out our plan, I could feel a sense of anticipation building within me. We were finally taking back control, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride at the strength of our family. "We'll start by gathering evidence," Eli said, his voice low and serious. "Everything Marla has done, from the financial manipulation to the emotional abuse, we need to document it all." I nodded in agreement. "And we need to be discreet about it. We can't let Marla catch wind of what we're doing." Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I don't know how much help I'll be," he said, his voice laced with guilt. "Marla has kept me in the dark about so much." "That's okay, son," Eli reassured him. "We'll work together to uncover the truth. The important thing is that we present a united front." As the days passed, we began to gather evidence of Marla's misdeeds. Bank statements, emails, and even recordings of her outbursts. Everything we could find to expose her true nature. "Look at this," Eli said one evening, shoving a stack of papers across the table. "She's been draining Nathan's accounts for years, using his money to fund her lavish lifestyle." I shook my head in disgust, anger and betrayal coursing through me. How could she do this to her own husband? Nathan's face was pale, his eyes haunted. "I never knew," he whispered. "I trusted her completely." "That's how she operates," I said, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "She manipulates and deceives until she gets what she wants." As we continued to piece together the puzzle of Marla's deceit, I could feel a sense of dread settling in my stomach. We were uncovering a level of betrayal and manipulation that went beyond anything I could have imagined. "We have to stop her," I said, my voice firm with determination. "No matter what it takes, we can't let her continue to control us like this." Eli and Nathan nodded in agreement, their eyes filled with the same resolve that burned within me. We were a family, and we would fight for our freedom together. As we solidified our plan, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. We were finally taking a stand, and I knew that no matter what happened, we would emerge stronger and more united than ever before. "What is all this?" Marla demanded, her eyes narrowing as she swept her gaze across the living room. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. "Sit down, Marla. We have something to discuss." Marla's lips curled into a sneer, but she complied, sinking into the armchair with a defiant air. "Well, let's get this over with." "We know what you've been doing," Eli said, his voice heavy with accusation. "We've seen the evidence." Marla's eyes widened, but she quickly regained her composure. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb with us, Marla," I spat. "We know about the money you've been stealing from Nathan, the lies you've told, and the ways you've been trying to manipulate us." Marla's face contorted with rage. "How dare you accuse me of such things?" "We have proof, Marla," Nathan said, his voice shaking with emotion. "Bank statements, recordings, everything we need to expose you for who you really are." Marla's eyes darted around the room, her mind racing. "You're all delusional," she hissed. "This is some kind of sick game you're playing." "It's not a game, Marla," I said, my voice heavy with the weight of her betrayal. "We know the truth, and we're not going to let you continue to control us like this." Marla sprang to her feet, her hands balled into fists. "You can't do this to me," she screamed. "I'm your family." "You were never family," Eli said, his voice cold and hard. "You're a parasite who latched onto our son and tried to suck us dry." Marla's eyes flashed with fury, and for a moment I thought she might lash out. But then she seemed to deflate, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You win." "No, Marla," I said, my heart heavy with sadness and anger. "We all lose. We lose the trust we had in you, the family we thought we could be, but we're not going to let you take anything else from us." Marla stared at me, her eyes filled with a mix of rage and fear. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You think you've won, but I'll make sure you pay for this." With that, she turned and stormed out of the room, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. "It's done," Eli said, his voice tinged with relief. "She knows we're on to her now." I nodded, feeling a sense of weight lift from my shoulders. "Yes, but this is just the beginning. We need to take steps to protect ourselves from her retaliation." Nathan nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "I'll start the divorce proceedings immediately, and we'll make sure she has no legal claim to this house or any of our assets." As we began to discuss the next steps, I felt a sense of hope blooming within me. We had faced down Marla's deceit and emerged victorious. It wouldn't be easy, but we were finally on the path to reclaiming our lives. "I can't believe you're doing this to me," Marla shrieked, her voice echoing through the living room. Nathan stood firm, his eyes filled with a resolve I had never seen before. "It's over, Marla. I'm filing for divorce." Marla's face contorted with fury, and for a moment I thought she might lash out physically. "You can't leave me. We're meant to be together." "No, Marla," Nathan said, his voice heavy with sadness and regret. "We were never meant to be together. You manipulated me from the start, and I was too blind to see it." Marla's eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally. "Renee, Eli, please, you have to talk some sense into him." I shook my head, my heart hardening against her pleas. "It's over, Marla. You've brought this on yourself." Marla turned back to Nathan, her eyes pleading. "Please, baby, don't do this. We can work things out, I promise." Nathan's expression remained resolute. "It's too late for promises, Marla. I've already started the proceedings, and I have all the evidence I need to ensure you don't get a penny from me." Marla's face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. "All of you. I'll make sure you pay for this betrayal." "We're not the ones who betrayed anyone, Marla," I said, my voice heavy with the weight of her actions. "You betrayed us, our trust, our family, everything." Marla's eyes flashed with fury, but she seemed to deflate, realizing the futility of her situation. "Fine," she spat. Have it your way. But don't come crawling back to me when you realize what a mistake you've made. With that, she turned and stormed out of the room, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. It's done, Nathan said, his voice tinged with relief and sadness. She knows it's over. I nodded, placing a comforting hand on his arm. You did the right thing, honey. I'm proud of you. Eli stepped forward, his expression one of grim determination. This isn't over, though. We need to take steps to protect ourselves from any retaliation. Nathan nodded. I've already started the legal proceedings, and I'll make sure she has no claim to any of our assets or this house. As we began to discuss the next steps, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure washing over me. We had faced down Marla's manipulation and deceit, and we had emerged victorious. It had been a long and difficult road, but we were finally on the path to reclaiming our lives. Please, Renee, Marla pleaded, her eyes brimming with tears. You have to talk to Nathan. He's making a terrible mistake. I stared at her, unmoved by her theatrics. Nathan has made his decision, Marla, and it's the right one. Marla's face contorted with rage. How can you say that? We're family. You're supposed to support us. I shook my head, my heart hardening against her manipulation. You were never family, Marla. You were a parasite who tried to suck us dry. Marla recoiled as if I had slapped her. You don't mean that, she whispered. We can work through this. I promise I'll change. It's too late for promises, I said, my voice heavy with the weight of her betrayal. You've had your chance, Marla, and you squandered it. Marla's eyes flashed with fury, and for a moment I thought she might lash out. But then she seemed to deflate, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Fine, she spat. Have it your way, but don't come crawling back to me when you realize what a mistake you've made. As she turned to leave, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. We had finally cut ties with Marla, and now we could begin to heal and move on. You handled that well, Eli said, stepping into the room. I'm proud of you. I nodded, grateful for his support. I'm just glad it's over. I never want to see her face again. Eli placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. We'll make sure of that. Nathan has taken all the necessary legal steps to protect us. As the days passed, I could feel a sense of normalcy returning to our lives. Gone were the constant demands and manipulations of Marla, replaced by a newfound peace and harmony. Nathan, too, seemed to be healing. The weight of Marla's betrayal had been lifted, and I could see him rediscovering the joy and contentment that had been so elusive during their marriage. Thank you, he said one evening as we sat on the back porch watching the sun dip below the trees, for always being there for me, even when I couldn't see the truth. I smiled, reaching out to squeeze his hand. You're our son, Nathan. We'll always be there for you, no matter what. As we sat together in the peaceful silence, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the journey we had been through. It had been difficult and painful, but we had emerged stronger and more united than ever before. It's a new beginning for us, I said, my voice filled with hope. A chance to start over and create the life we've always dreamed of. Eli nodded, his eyes shining with determination. And this time, we'll do it on our terms. No more manipulation, no more demands, just peace and happiness. As the night fell and the stars began to twinkle overhead, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. We had faced down the darkness and emerged into the light, and I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together as a family. You're nothing but dead weight in your own house. Jenna's piercing words cut through the air like a dagger, striking at the core of my being. My heart pounded as I watched her face contort with rage, spewing vitriol at my husband, Ron, and me. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner, but the tension had been building for weeks. Jenna, my son Derek's wife, had grown increasingly hostile and dismissive towards us. She had always been a bit of a firecracker, but her behavior had taken a drastic turn for the worse. Why should we have to put up with this? She continued, her voice dripping with disdain. You two are a burden, and it's time you realized it. Ron reached out to her, his gentle demeanor a stark contrast to her fury. Jenna, please, let's not escalate this any further. But it was too late. The veil had been lifted, revealing the true nature of our once-beloved daughter-in-law. Don't you dare try to placate me, old man. She spat. You and your pathetic wife have worn out your welcome in this house. Derek, my son, sat in stunned silence, unable or unwilling to intervene. It was as if he didn't recognize the woman he had married. I couldn't take it anymore. How dare you speak to us like that? I said, my voice trembling with rage and disbelief. We are your family, and we have given everything to support you and Derek. Jenna let out a derisive laugh. Support? You call leeching off our finances and invading our privacy support? You're delusional. Her words stung like a slap in the face. Ron and I had always been hard-working, contributing significantly to the household expenses and taking care of the chores. But Jenna's manipulation had twisted the truth, making us seem like a burden rather than the loving family we had always been. I looked to Derek, hoping he would step in and defend us, but he remained silent, his head hanging low. Jenna sneered at us. It's time for you to pack your bags and get out. This is our home, and we don't need you here anymore. As she stormed out of the room, leaving a trail of anger and confusion in her wake, I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the sweet, responsible young woman we had once welcomed into our family. It was as if a dark veil had been lifted, exposing the true Jenna, cold, manipulative, and utterly devoid of compassion. Ron and I sat in stunned silence, our hearts heavy with the realization that the happy family we had cherished was nothing more than an illusion. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but one thing was certain. We would not allow Jenna's tyranny to continue unchallenged. The next few days were tense, to say the least. Jenna's outburst had created an unbearable atmosphere in our home. Ron and I treaded carefully, trying to avoid further confrontation, but it was clear that the damage had been done. Jenna's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would go from periods of sullen silence to outbursts of rage, lashing out at us for the smallest perceived offenses. "What's the matter with you, Jenna?" Derek asked one evening, his voice strained. "You've been acting so strange lately." Jenna shot him a withering glare. "Don't pretend you don't know what's going on, Derek. Your parents are the problem, not me." "But they've done nothing wrong," Derek protested. "They're just trying to help us out." "Help?" Jenna let out a harsh laugh. "They're nothing but a burden, and you're too blind to see it." Derek shook his head, his frustration evident. "I don't understand what's gotten into you. This isn't like you at all." "You're right, Derek," Jenna said, her voice dripping with contempt. "This isn't the me you thought you knew. That was just an act, and now the real me is coming out." Ron and I exchanged a worried glance. Jenna's words sent a chill down my spine. Had our entire relationship with her been a lie? The tension continued to escalate in the following days, with Jenna becoming increasingly hostile and volatile. She would deliberately ignore us or make cutting remarks, shattering the illusion of the perfect family we had once believed in. It all came to a head at a family dinner, where Jenna's behavior reached a new low. As we sat around the table, she began to berate us, her words laced with venom. "You two are nothing but leeches, sucking the life out of our family." She spat. "You're a constant drain on our resources and our happiness." "Jenna, please," Ron pleaded, his voice shaking. "We've always contributed our fair share. Why are you treating us like this?" "Because you deserve it," Jenna snarled. "You're both pathetic and weak, clinging to your son and his wife for support. It's time you learned your place." I couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. This was the woman who had once professed her love and admiration for us, who had promised to be a loyal and devoted family member. But now her true colors were on display, and they were darker than we could have ever imagined. Derek tried to intervene, but Jenna shut him down with a withering glare. "Don't you dare defend them, Derek. They're not worth it." As Jenna stormed out of the room, leaving us in a state of shock and disbelief, I realized that our family was in crisis. We had been blind to Jenna's true nature, and now we were paying the price. But I was determined not to let her manipulate and control us any longer. It was time to take action and reclaim our dignity. In the aftermath of Jenna's outburst, Derek seemed to be questioning everything he thought he knew about his wife. He confided in me that he was struggling to reconcile the woman he had married with the one who had been tormenting us. "Mom, I just don't understand what's going on with her," he said, his voice heavy with confusion and pain. "It's like she's a completely different person." I placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I know, honey. Her behavior has been shocking, to say the least. I need to get to the bottom of this, Derek said, a newfound determination in his eyes. There has to be an explanation for why she's acting this way. I nodded, hoping that he would find the answers he was seeking. I had long since given up trying to make sense of Jenna's actions. A few days later, Derek approached me with a grim expression on his face. "Mom, I hired a private investigator to look into Jenna's past," he said. "What they uncovered is disturbing." My heart sank as he began to reveal the details of Jenna's history. It seemed that her manipulative behavior was nothing new. She had a pattern of latching onto wealthy families and exploiting them for her own gain. "She's been involved in multiple scams and fraud cases," Derek said, his voice shaking. "She's even been married before, to a wealthy businessman who she cleaned out before leaving him penniless." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But how could she have hidden all of this? I asked, feeling sick to my stomach. "She's a master manipulator," Derek replied. "She presents herself as a perfect devoted partner, but it's all an act. She's been playing me this whole time." As the full scope of Jenna's deceit became clear, Derek's face crumpled with anguish. "I can't believe I let her do this to us," he said, burying his head in his hands. "I should have seen it coming." "This isn't your fault, Derek," I said, trying to comfort him. "She fooled us all with her lies." But even as I tried to reassure him, I could see the conflict written on his face. He had invested so much in his relationship with Jenna, and the revelation of her true nature had shaken him to his core. "What am I going to do, Mom?" he asked, his eyes pleading with me for guidance. "I can't stay with her after everything she's done, but it's still so hard to let go." I took a deep breath, knowing that I had to be strong for him. "You need to make a choice," I said, my voice firm. "Jenna has shown her true colors, and she's not going to change. If you stay with her, she'll continue to manipulate and exploit you, just like she's done to so many others." Derek nodded, his jaw set in determination. "You're right," he said. "I can't let her continue to hurt us like this. It's time to take a stand." As he left the room, I could see the resolve in his eyes. Jenna's web of lies was finally unraveling, and we were going to make her pay for the pain she had caused our family. The road ahead would be difficult, but we were united in our mission to seek justice and reclaim our dignity. In the weeks that followed, the tension in our household reached a boiling point. Jenna's hostility seemed to escalate with every passing day, as if she were determined to make our lives a living hell. It all came to a head when I suffered a minor injury while doing yard work. Nothing too serious, but it left me with a sprained ankle and limited mobility. Jenna, of course, saw this as an opportunity to further torment us. "You know, with your injury, it might be better if you and Ron moved in with us for a while," she said, a sickly sweet smile plastered on her face. "We wouldn't want you to struggle with the stairs and getting around the house." I narrowed my eyes, sensing the ulterior motive behind her offer. "That's very kind of you, Jenna, but we'll manage just fine." "Nonsense," she insisted, her voice dripping with false concern. "It's the least we can do to help out our family." Derek, sensing my hesitation, stepped in. "Mom, Jenna's right. It might be better if you and Dad stay with us for a bit until you're back on your feet." I glanced at Ron, who shrugged helplessly. We both knew that fighting Jenna's suggestion would only lead to more conflict. "Fine," I conceded, trying to hide my reluctance. "If you insist." Jenna's smile widened, but there was a gleam in her eye that sent a chill down my spine. "Excellent. We'll get the guest room ready right away." As we settled into our temporary living arrangement, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jenna had ulterior motives. Sure enough, it didn't take long for her true intentions to become clear. She began to shirk all household responsibilities, leaving the cleaning, cooking, and laundry to Ron and me. Whenever we tried to protest, she would simply wave us off with a dismissive, "You're the one staying here. The least you can do is help out." Derek, caught in the middle, seemed torn between defending us and trying to keep the peace with his wife. "Jenna, this isn't right," he would say, but she would brush him off with a flippant remark. "Don't be so dramatic, Derek. They're just doing their fair share." As the weeks wore on, Jenna's behavior became increasingly erratic and controlling. She would deliberately isolate us from Derek, making sure we were never alone with him for long, It was as if she were afraid we would turn him against her. "She's trying to drive a wedge between us," I confided in Ron one night as we lay in bed, exhausted from the day's emotional turmoil. Ron nodded warily. "I know. She's determined to break our family apart." As the tension continued to mount, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Jenna's manipulative tactics were pushing us to the breaking point, and I feared that soon something would have to give. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come. Jenna's harassment seemed to know no bounds. As the days wore on, her tactics became increasingly brazen and cruel. "Why are you two still here?" She would sneer whenever Ron and I entered a room. "Aren't you overstaying your welcome?" Derek, to his credit, tried to intervene. "Jenna, that's enough. They're my parents, and they have every right to be here." But Jenna would simply laugh in his face. "Oh, Derek, always the dutiful son. When are you going to realize that they're using you?" Ron and I would exchange helpless glances, our hearts breaking as we watched our son caught in the crossfire. Jenna's behavior grew increasingly erratic and unpredictable. She would go from periods of cold silence to outbursts of rage, lashing out at us for the smallest perceived offenses. "What's the matter with you?" Derek would plead, his eyes filled with anguish. "Why are you treating them like this?" "Because they deserve it," Jenna would shout, her face contorted with fury. "They're nothing but leeches, draining the life out of our family." I couldn't believe the venom spewing from her lips. This was supposed to be the woman who had promised to love and cherish our family, but now she seemed hell-bent on destroying us. The breaking point came one evening as we sat down for dinner. Jenna, as usual, had shirked all responsibility for preparing the meal, leaving it to Ron and me to cook and serve. As we all sat down at the table, Jenna looked around with a sneer. "What's this? You two couldn't even be bothered to set the table properly?" I bristled at her accusation. "We did our best, Jenna. If you have a problem with it, maybe you should have helped out." Jenna's eyes flashed with rage. "How dare you speak to me like that in my own home?" she snarled. "You ungrateful old hag." Before I could respond, Jenna slammed her hands on the table, causing the dishes to rattle. "That's it. I've had enough of you two dragging us down. It's time for you to pack your bags and get out." Derek jumped to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "Jenna, stop this. They're not going anywhere." But Jenna ignored him, her eyes boring into me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "You have 24 hours to gather your things and leave," she said, her voice low and menacing. "If you're not out by then, I'll have the police remove you." Tears stung my eyes as I watched Derek wrestle with his emotions, torn between defending us and trying to reason with his wife. As Jenna stormed out of the room, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake, I knew that the time for passivity was over. We had tried to reason with her, to appeal to her better nature, but all our efforts had been in vain. Ron and I exchanged a look, a silent understanding passing between us. We had endured enough. It was time to take a stand and reclaim our dignity. "Pack your bags," I said to Ron, my voice steely with determination. "We're leaving this house, and we're not going quietly." From that moment on, there was no turning back. We were going to fight fire with fire, and Jenna was about to face the consequences of her actions. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of anger and determination. Ron and I wasted no time in packing our belongings, our hands trembling with a mix of rage and sorrow. "I can't believe she's doing this to us," Ron said, his voice thick with emotion as he folded his clothes into a suitcase. "After everything we've done for her." I shook my head, my jaw clenched. "She's shown her true colors, Ron. We can't let her continue to walk all over us like this." As we packed, we could hear the sound of raised voices coming from the living room. Derek and Jenna were engaged in a heated argument, their words punctuated by the occasional crash of something being thrown or knocked over. "Can't believe you're kicking them out." Derek's voice rang out, laced with disbelief and anger. "They're your family too, Jenna." "They're dead weight, Derek," Jenna shouted back. "They've been holding us back for far too long. It's time we cut them loose." I winced at her words, my heart aching for my son. He was caught in the middle of a war he never asked for, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his love for his parents. As we finished packing our last few belongings, Derek appeared in the doorway, his face pale and drawn. "Mom, "Dad, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice heavy with anguish. "I tried to talk her out of this, but she won't listen to reason." I pulled him into a tight embrace, fighting back tears. "It's not your fault, honey. Jenna's made her choice, and we have to respect that." Derek shook his head, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know who she is anymore," he said, his voice breaking. "The woman I married has become a stranger to me." As we headed towards the front door, our bags in hand, Jenna appeared, a triumphant sneer plastered on her face. "Well, look who's finally leaving," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "It's about time you two learned your place." I bristled at her words, my anger rising like a tidal wave. "You're a twisted, manipulative woman, Jenna," I spat, "and you're going to regret the day you turned on this family." Jenna simply laughed, unfazed by my words. "Empty threats, as always. You two have no power here. This is my house, and I decide who stays and who goes." As she spoke, I caught a glimpse of Derek standing behind her, his face twisted into a mask of anguish and conflict. It was as if he were watching the slow destruction of everything he had believed in, powerless to stop it. With one final glare at Jenna, Ron and I turned and walked out the door, our heads held high. We had been forced out of our own home, but we refused to let her see our pain. As we loaded our bags into the car and prepared to drive away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality wash over me. Our ties to Jenna had been severed, perhaps for good. But in that moment, I knew that we had made the right choice. We had reclaimed our dignity and refused to be victimized any longer. As we pulled away from the house, leaving our old life behind, I glanced in the rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of Derek standing in the doorway, his shoulders slumped in defeat. It was a painful sight, but it only strengthened my resolve. We were free of Jenna's tyranny, and now it was time to focus on the next chapter of our lives. The road ahead would be difficult, but we were determined to make her pay for the pain she had inflicted on our family. The days following our departure from the house were filled with a tense silence. Ron and I had found temporary refuge in a modest apartment, but the weight of what had happened hung heavy in the air. Derek had remained distant, no doubt struggling to come to terms with the fracturing of his marriage. I longed to reach out to him, to offer comfort and support, but I knew he needed time to process everything on his own terms. It wasn't until a week later that he finally came to see us, his face etched with anguish and determination. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," he said as we ushered him into the small living room. "Of course, honey," I replied, my heart aching at the sight of his pain. "What's on your mind?" Derek took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "I've made a decision," he said, his voice steady. "I'm leaving Jenna." Ron and I exchanged a glance, equal parts surprised and relieved. "Are you sure about this, son?" Ron asked, placing a comforting hand on Derek's shoulder. Derek nodded, his jaw set. "It's the only choice I have left. Her behavior has become too much to bear, and I can't continue living with someone who treats my family with such cruelty and disrespect." As he spoke, the full weight of his decision seemed to hit him, and his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I thought I knew her," he said, his voice breaking. "But the woman I married is gone, replaced by someone cold and heartless." I pulled him into a tight embrace, fighting back my own emotions. "I'm so sorry, Derek," I said, my voice thick with sorrow. "No one should have to go through what you're experiencing." Derek pulled back, his face hardening with resolve. "It's not just her treatment of you and Dad," he continued. "She's been unfaithful, and I've found evidence of her involvement in financial fraud and other illegal activities." I couldn't help but gasp at the revelation. "Jenna's been cheating and breaking the law?" I asked, my heart sinking. Derek nodded grimly. "It seems her manipulative behavior has been a pattern throughout her life. She's been using me, just like she used her previous husband before me." As the full scope of Jenna's deception became clear, a wave of anger washed over me. She had not only tormented our family, but had also betrayed Derek's trust in the worst possible way. "That's it," I said, my voice steely with determination. "She's gone too far this time. We can't let her get away with this." Derek looked at me, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "You're right, Mom. It's time we fought back and held her accountable for her actions." As we sat together, discussing our next steps and strategizing our approach, I could sense a shift in the air. Derek had finally awakened to the truth about Jenna, and he was no longer willing to be a passive victim in her web of lies and deceit. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with legal battles and emotional turmoil. But we were united in our resolve to seek justice and reclaim our dignity. Jenna's reign of terror over our family was coming to an end, and she was about to face the consequences of her actions. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity as we prepared to confront Jenna and reclaim our belongings from the house. Derek had enlisted the help of his uncle, a former law enforcement officer, to accompany us and ensure a peaceful resolution. As we pulled up to the familiar driveway, a knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. This was it, the final showdown with the woman who had wreaked so much havoc on our family. "Remember, stay calm and don't engage with her unless absolutely necessary," Derek's Uncle Tom instructed us. "We're just here to retrieve your belongings and leave. Any confrontation should be avoided." Ron and I nodded, our jaws set with determination. We had come too far to let Jenna's mind games derail us now. As we approached the front door, it swung open and Jenna appeared, her face contorted into a sneer. Well, if it isn't the prodigal family returning," she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. Derek stepped forward, his shoulders squared. "We're not here to cause trouble, Jenna," he said, his voice steady. "We've come to collect our belongings and leave, that's all." Jenna's eyes narrowed as she took in the presence of Tom. "Who's this, then? Your muscle to try and intimidate me?" She let out a harsh laugh. "Don't bother. You're not scaring anyone." Tom remained impassive, his years of training evident in his calm demeanor. "Ma'am, we're not here to cause any problems. We just want to retrieve the belongings and be on our way." Jenna's eyes flashed with rage as she turned to Derek. "You really think you can just waltz back in here and take whatever you want?" she snarled. "This is my house, and you have no right to anything in it." Derek held up a hand, his face hardening. "That's enough, Jenna. You know full well that many of those belongings are my parents' property. We're not leaving until we get them back." For a moment, it seemed like Jenna might escalate the situation further, her body tensed like a coiled spring. But as she took in the determined expressions on our faces and the presence of Tom, her resolve seemed to falter. "Fine," she spat, stepping aside. "Take your trash and get out of my sight." As we entered the house and began retrieving our belongings, Jenna paced around us like a caged animal, her eyes burning with hatred. "You think you've won, don't you?" she sneered, her voice trembling with anger. "Well, this isn't over. You'll pay for this, all of you." Derek paused in his task, turning to face her. "Enough, Jenna. We're not here to fight with you. Just let us take our things and leave in peace." Jenna's face twisted into an ugly sneer. "Peace? You want peace after everything you've done to me?" She let out a bitter laugh. "You're all pathetic. You'll regret this, mark my words." As we loaded the last of our belongings into the car, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. The battle was won, and Jenna's reign of terror had finally come to an end. As we drove away, leaving Jenna's angry shouts behind us, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her standing on the porch, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. In that moment, she looked small and powerless, her threats ringing hollow. We had reclaimed our dignity and refused to be bullied any longer. Jenna's downfall was complete, and she was left alone to face the consequences of her actions. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with legal battles and the emotional turmoil of Derek's divorce. But we were united in our resolve to seek justice and rebuild our lives, free from the tyranny that had once threatened to destroy us. As we drove into the sunset, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and determination. We had faced adversity head-on and emerged victorious, and now it was time to move forward, stronger and more resilient than ever before.